So, hello everybody. I think it's always quite a challenge to come after Barack Obama, so at least we will give it a shot, Antonia and myself. And before we jump into the topic, maybe a few words about ourselves. Antonia, you might start.
Sure, a word about myself. So I suppose I'm from Canada originally, wearing a very old borrowed dirndl from a good friend of mine, but I work now in Switzerland with the World Economic Forum. And my purpose and passion in life is really trying to, let's say, use the platforms and systems that we have to create a better and more effective economic system.
My name is Andrejewski. I'm the managing partner here for the southern region of KPMG, and besides a lot of other subjects I'm dealing with, I'm focusing on the issue of sustainability out of a lot of perspectives, because even for a professional service firm, which seems to have a quite different business model, that's one of the changing things, and I'm happy to reflect today, together with Antonia, some aspects of circular economy, because I think it's one of the key cornerstones which will change our way of doing business. And before we jump into the subject, in a dialogue, Antonia will give us a certain kind of idea what we are talking about, because she clearly is the expert on stage on the subject.
Thank you. So I think I just want to start with a short story. So 2 weeks ago, my 5-year-old daughter came home from school and she said, "Mama, can I take a bag to school?" I was a bit confused. I said, "Why?" She says, "Well, because at recess, I've been working with my friends to pick up all the trash, and there's so much that I can't hold it in my hands, and I need a bag to pick it up and take it and put it in the garbage." At 5 years old, of course, one side of me was incredibly proud. All my brainwashing had sunk in. And I had a 5-year-old activist as a child, but really I guess it wasn't until last week when I was in New York at the UN General Assembly and I heard Greta Thunberg speak that I was really conflicted. You know, what world have we created where a 5-year-old child is spending the time she should be spending with her schoolmates playing, picking up garbage and putting it in the garbage, in a country like Switzerland, which is, you know, purportedly one of the cleanest countries in the world. So we clearly have a pretty systemic challenge that we need to fix. You know, so some of our research and that of our partners show that, you see these images, by 2050, we're expected to have more plastic than fish in the ocean by weight. That's one garbage truck every single minute. We heard this morning, food. About a third of the food produced for human consumption is going to waste at a time when billions of people don't have access to food. Electronics and fashion, 2 other examples. You know, so currently, everybody has hundreds of electronics devices sitting in their drawers. We've estimated with the UN partners there's about $63 billion worth of value, things like gold, platinum, rare earth metals sitting in electronic devices that people just are not getting access to while we mine the earth. And finally, fashion. You know, so fashion, all of us are wearing clothes. I'm happy to report that the dirndl that I'm wearing is borrowed from a dear friend who inherited it from her mother. It's 50 years old. But today we live in a world of fast fashion. You know, clothing purchasing has increased significantly, 2 times over the past 4 years. We're expected to see clothing industry grow 5 times to 2050 because of the advent of fast fashion. So we have a challenge. But at the same time, I think, let's say the positive news is that we have ideas for a new systemic approach, and that's when we talk about the circular economy. It's not about recycling, it's not about waste management, it's about redesigning our entire system, rethinking how we design products, use products, reuse products, keep them longer, but actually then integrate the materials from those products into new systems for a next use, not the end of life. And I think really the message here is that innovators, entrepreneurs around the world are recognizing that this isn't just a problem, it's a massive trillion-dollar opportunity. And technologies that we have, you know, we heard about it this morning, artificial intelligence, blockchain, are giving us the ability to implement these solutions. And so really, I think it's just a massive opportunity that everybody here in this room and at this conference can be a part of.
Clearly, I think that's a quite thoughtful situation we are right now. And in our eyes, or in my eyes, I think there are a lot of things which come together when you define future business models and the way of doing business, and that's part of my job to consult with my clients on that one. And I basically think there are three factors which drive business in the future. It's of course the geopolitical environment, it's a technological progress, and it's the question how you define ESG, environmental, social, and governance issues. And of course, you know, I'm not an engineer. My father was an engineer. He actually was working on how to clean up diesel when he was a young guy. But I'm an accountant, so for me it's always important to number things, because I'm a deep believer if you are able to find rules and setups, how impacts can be measured and can be harmonized on an international level, that is a solution to problems, because it gives you a basis how you can develop ideas and how you can develop innovation. And you just stayed in New York, and besides having regulation and probably putting price tags on solutions and getting things steered into the right direction, for me there are two major things which we have to drive forward. The first one is the international harmonization, and the second one is I always call it an attitude adjustment or an attitude development. And you just described it from your daughter, and I'm a father of three, and I always have familiar quotes on this one. My oldest always tells me that, Father, you're a little bit from yesterday, but I see some good starting points. So that's something I feel at home. So maybe the first question to you, and also reflecting a little bit what happened in New York, is what do you see right now on the overall path of circular economy, and especially the discussions which took place, the broad direction? Is something really happening? Because what really has changed in my perception over the last year is the anticipation of the issue, but now we have to do something. So what's happening?
So maybe a few points. So indeed, I was last week in New York at the General Assembly and the Climate Summit, and I think one thing that we haven't seen before that we see today is mass mobilization, right? So millions of people now, citizens coming onto the street and really preaching to the so-called leaders that they really need to start taking serious action. So that's one thing, is we have this mass mobilization, a moment in time that we really need to use and keep that momentum going forward to move from, let's say, momentum and commitment to real true action. And I think the second point is that's where really we do see vehicles like the circular economy as a way to channel that energy into solutions, right? So resources, the things that we extract, the materials that we extract from the environment, put them into our products, our economy to function, are responsible for about half of CO2 emissions, depending on how you break it down. So all of these things have an incredible impact. We touch all of these things. We touch our clothes, we touch our phones, and therefore we have the ability and a responsibility to act in that way. So I think the combination of, let's say, mobilization of energy with the ability to drive solutions through things like the circular economy, amongst others, is really positive. And as I said before, you know, the technologies are there to enable us to do this, but we also need the rules of the game, right? This is incredibly important, is that technology on its own is not going to solve these challenges. We need the leaders, governments, and business to actually set frameworks that keep us within what we call the planetary boundaries. We need to have constraint to innovate into, rather than innovate without any boundaries of constraint. And I think that's, let's say, the nuance that we have to reflect on coming out of New York, and really reflect on as we go into the climate negotiations later this year, is that the leaders need to set the constraints and the frameworks and the boundaries and support the innovation to then do its job.
Please go ahead. I really think we are going to a second age of enlightenment, because that, in my eyes, is a basis for changing things. And for that, we always need leaders. Of course, you talked and anticipated the messages of the leaders in New York, but leaders are not only the people who run big companies and who run government. I think entrepreneurs, startup entrepreneurs, are also leaders. And when you look at your topic and at your ideas and your concerns you're having and the hopes you're having, what is the role of startups in the way of driving innovation and driving enlightenment in the field of circular economy.
So I think, as I said before, I think moving to a circular economy, we need, we do need leadership from all corners. I think, as Obama said, we need all hands on deck to really drive these solutions. So I think when I think about startups and entrepreneurs, the really interesting disruptions that we're seeing are really coming from this community. And I think we often talk about startups and entrepreneurs as sort of smaller organizations and entities, but it's important to remember that some of the biggest companies of today, 10 years ago, were startups and entrepreneurs. So it's not like this is an insignificant opportunity. So we need disruption. We need to break the system, the status quo that we're working within, and I think this is really where this community comes from. I think, the one thing that I, personally am quite passionate about is what I call kind of ground up, fit for context innovation. I spent 2 years living in Bhutan, in the middle of the Himalayas. And what struck me there was the innovation, the entrepreneurship that came from corners that you would never expect. And I think this is really something that I'm sort of trying to get going within the World Economic Forum, is how can we create a system that surfaces, supports, and connects ground up, fit for context innovators trying to solve for the circular economy. Because I think there's innovators all around the world finding interesting solutions, tapping into those $1 trillion of wasted resources. And I think there's a huge opportunity that we can grab onto to help then influence the mobilization of effort at the global level with the multinationals and with the governments to show that this can be done.
When we look at a little bit deeper, and I'm dealing day to day with the corporate world, and right now everything is measured pretty clear by profit. That has changed over the last years, with a different thought process. We are working on a bigger project together with a couple of listed companies in Germany, which is called True Value, which actually tries to reflect what is really the value of a company. And we are not looking at economic profit, we're looking at social profit. Of course, we're looking at economic effects which have to be internalized. And of course, we are looking at the environmental part of the story. And we find out that this gives a change in a lot of perspectives. First of all, how you conduct business, where you want to go, and you have to define a different purpose to get a different impact. And I would be interested how you see that story. Is that something which will drive business in the future, and also will drive capital markets? Because I found it very inspiring this morning when there were some thoughts by Barack Obama that the way of we conduct business in our capitalistic system has to be reviewed. And of course, impact and a new definition of value is needed for that one. So how would you define a new value, and how would you tackle that issue?
I mean, if you take an example, right, a t-shirt, do we honestly think that it's possible to produce a t-shirt that sells for $1 in a way that provides positive environmental, human benefits, environmental impacts to society? I mean, it's just not possible. Right, so we've kind of we're in a system where the approach to growing has been done with relatively little constraint. And it's not that constraint is going to solve for this, but I think it's really that we have to begin really integrating a value-based system, one that really recognizes that we truly believe in the Sustainable Development Goals collectively, and that we will prioritize those goals in how we conduct business and how we behave as citizens as well. And so it's incredibly important for us to reflect on that as we go into the discussions about sort of the type of economic systems that we work within, and the constraints that we have or don't have to be able to move in that direction. So I think it is fundamental. But at the same time, we have to kind of do this dramatically, but also pragmatically, right? And that's where, when we think about really redesigning value chains, really kind of getting down from the bottom to the upstream of products and materials, if we rethink the way, every step of that journey, really rethink how things are designed, how they're produced, how they're consumed, it gives us the opportunity to really move into a system where we can account for all of the impacts and benefits that happen along the way. And actually, technology is enabling us to do this much more effectively now. You know, everybody talks about blockchain, about artificial intelligence, but we actually can genuinely now, which we couldn't necessarily do 20 years ago, track exactly where products and assets are along the value chain and attribute value to the people along that value chain in a way that can provide a much more equitable approach to production, consumption, and livelihoods as well. So I think we have to do it. We have the technology to do it. Now we just need the leadership and the will to actually make it happen.
Antonia, I think that was a very good closing remark. Thanks for your inspiring thoughts, and thanks for your patience and your audience, and I wish you a great conference for the days to come. Thank you.